Hello, math students. Welcome back to Module 4, Expressions and Equations. This is Lesson 22, and it's called Problems in Mathematical Terms. Our goal for today we will determine the independent and the dependent variables of an equation. The question that I want you to be thinking about in this lesson is, how do you identify variables in an equation? All right, so check this out. Can a basketball team win a game without making any points? And if we're talking about forfeiting, we're not talking about that. We're just actually saying, if you're playing a regular game, can you identify who the winner would be without making any points? The answer is no. Can a doctor get a paycheck if he or she doesn't work? The answer is no. Can you go to college without graduating from high school? The answer is no. So what you need to think about in all of those scenarios that are above is that something depends on something else. So what is the relationship in all of the above scenarios? The relationship that you're learning about is dependent and independent things. Okay? So let's go back and look at it and see if we can figure out which one would be the independent and which one would be the dependent. Can a basketball team win a game without making any points? So what we would have to say right here is the basketball team is the independent, right? But the win is the dependent, because the win depends on if they make any points or not. So the basketball team will still exist whether they win or lose, but they won't win without making any points. So the team relies on making points in order to get the win. So the win is the dependent, the team is the independent. Okay? Can a doctor get a paycheck if he or she doesn't go to work? So we would say the independent in this one is the doctor, okay? And getting a paycheck is the dependent because he or she has to go to work, right, in order to get paid. So the doctor can still be a doctor regardless of whether he or she makes a paycheck. He or she will still be a doctor. But their paycheck depends on if they go to work or not. So the doctor is the independent, the paycheck is the dependent. It depends on the doctor going to work in order to make it exist. All right, can you go to college without graduating from high school? So the independent is you are the independent, okay? And then going to college would be the dependent. And why is going to college the dependent? Because if you don't graduate from high school, so you have to graduate from high school in order to go to college. So the independent again is you're still going to exist whether you go to college or not. But going to college depends on whether you graduate from high school. So college is dependent on you graduating and you are the independent. Okay? So we're talking about dependent and independent things, and now what we're going to do is we're going to apply that to some math problems. All right, so things to know. An independent variable is a variable that is not the result of something else. It can exist whether that something else happens or not, okay? You will still exist whether you go to college or not, okay? The dependent variable is the variable that does result from something else. So college will happen after you graduate from high school because you have to have enough high school credits in order for a college to recognize that you're ready to go there. So college will not happen without you graduating from high school. So it's very important to figure out which one of the items could exist without something else. And then it also is very, very important in order to identify how that something will not exist without something else happening, okay? And so talking about independent variables and dependent variables, you just have to recognize that one can exist without the other and the other cannot exist without the other. And so that's how you need to know the difference between independent variables and variables, or independent and dependent variables. One thing that I want to add to this, just so that you know, and how you're going to be using it in our math, is we have been working with ratio tables a lot this year. And a lot of times we use our ratio tables where the independent variable, so independent variable, lives on this side of the ratio table. And then the dependent variable lives on this side of the ratio table. And a lot of times we talk about the independent variable being x and the dependent variable being y. Now that's not always the case forever and ever and ever, but most likely the independent variable is usually the x and the dependent variable is the y. And the reason why we talk about this is y cannot exist without changing x. And so that's what we're thinking about with that, okay? And so a lot of times what we're trying to use this for is figuring out in a scenario what will happen as a result of something else, okay? And so that's what you've got to be thinking about with independent and dependent variables. So remember, the x value is usually the independent and the y value is usually the dependent, okay? All right, so today we will determine the dependent and independent variables of equations, which we were looking at. How do you identify variables in an equation? Basically, you just have to see and ask yourself, could this exist without this? And if the answer is yes, then that's the independent. And then when you say, could this number exist without this one? And the answer is no, then that's how you identify the dependent. So it's really thinking logically and really practicing. We will be doing some mathematical practice with this in class. Okay, kiddos, that's all I have for you. Talk to you soon. Bye.